I felt that everything that I was getting, I deserved. I deserved to be in prison. I deserved to be incarcerated because I walked out on my kids. I walked out on my wife. You know, I just had made a mess of my life, and this is my punishment. I grew up in the inner city of Chattanooga. Grew up in a single-parent home. Never knew my dad. The first dad that I ever know was me. I had a child when I was a high school student. I didn't know how to spend time with my child. I had never had anybody to spend time with me. And eventually I met a high school young lady named Gwen, and she was different than anybody I had ever dated before. She was keeping herself for marriage, and I was intrigued by that. And we began to date and asked Gwen to marry me, and she said yes, and I promised her the world. And in that process, I found out that I didn't understand love. I didn't know how to love Gwen. I had never seen a man love my mother. And eventually it caused problems in our marriage. My lifestyle, hanging out, partying, drinking, would go back to the housing projects to see my mom, and saw a lot of my friends. They had chose the lifestyle of a drug dealer, and they was making a lot of money. And because Gwen and I both was born in financial poverty, I began to justify wrong. I began to even tell myself that if I became a drug dealer, that I can give Gwen the American dream. I can give her everything that we never had. I really believe that stuff would make us happy. And so I pursued that lifestyle with killing, stealing, and destroying people's lives that I grew up with. Young men who I played football with, young ladies who was cheerleaders. I destroyed their life by selling them crack cocaine. But in that same process, I was destroying my marriage. Gwen had became a believer and didn't want no part of my lifestyle, and so it was causing tension in the marriage. And one day when our daughter was 3 years old and our son was 2 weeks old, I called Gwen and told her I didn't want to be married anymore. Eventually, Gwen and I, we legally divorced because of my lifestyle and not being in her life or the kids' lives. And one day, I was on my way from Atlanta back to my hometown, and I was stopped on the interstate. I had over $20,000 worth of cocaine, $4,000 in cash, and 2 automatic weapons. I was eventually sentenced to 10 years to serve 4 because I took a plea bargain. And in prison, I began to see myself as a failure, that my marriage had failed. I had failed as a father, and now I was a failure in life. And there was some hopelessness in my life. I felt hopeless. And honestly, I thought about maybe I ought to just take my life. You know, everything I have tried in life, I have failed. I can't even be a good drug dealer, you know. And I would go to chapel service with one intent, to con God. I had been conning people all my life. And that if I earn God's favor, God would just get me out of prison. So really I can go back and live my lifestyle of a drug dealer. And so my motives was wrong when I went to chapel service. I had no intent of connecting with God, having an encounter with God. I really wanted the warden to see me and the guards to see me. And even though my motives was wrong, God's motives was that he loved me and he was drawing me unto himself. And God began to share with me in my cell that, Darryl, you're a sinner. Not because you grew up in the housing projects, not because you had a child, but it's your very nature. If you'd have been born in suburbia America and would have had both of your parents, and you would have kept yourself sexually pure, and you would have never sold drugs, and you would have never walked out on your family, you still would need my grace. And in that process, I fell on my knees before a holy God, and I asked Jesus to come into my life to be my Savior and Lord. And he came and he said, Darryl, I'm not going to fix you up. I'm not going to straighten you out. I'm going to make you new. I'm going to give you a new nature, but I'm just not going to give you anybody's nature. I'm not giving you Moses or Abraham or some world-known evangelist nature. I'm going to give you the nature of my son. And I had an encounter with the true and living God, and I fell in love with him and fell in love with his word and spent time reading his word. And in that process, God brought me out of prison early after just serving right at 3 years. It was enough that God rescued me from a prison, and not just a physical prison, but a spiritual prison, a prison of sin and death. And then he brought me out of a physical prison. That was enough. But then he gave me my family back, and gave me my wife and my 2 kids, and then blessed us with another son when we remarried. And really, God used them to give me back the years that the locusts had eaten. And I'm just so thankful and grateful that God pursued me and rescued me and gave me hope. And even when I'm not faithful, God has always been faithful. And in this journey, God has proven himself over and over and over and over again that he's faithful and that I can trust him. And when I trust him, joy comes.